Welcome, everyone. It's so great to have you here with us today. My name is Caitlin. I'm a lead principal with Clear Horizon, and I'm going to be hosting the session today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we gather today on traditional land. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and beyond, and pay our respects to elders past and present. I extend respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nation peoples here with us today. I'm joining you from Whadjuk Noongar country, and I invite you now to turn your attention to the traditional lands that you are on and the unique cultural, spiritual relationships that are held by First Nations people with the land, the sky, the waters and the seas in the place where you are. And by starting here, and by centering First Nations values and perspectives and approaches in our work, we will better contribute to equity and sustainability. Today's session is part of the Clear Horizon Ripple Effect series. The purpose of these sessions is to bring together guests to talk about all things measurement, evaluation and learning. Today's session is a slightly longer format. We're going to have 40 minutes of conversation and then some time for Q&A at the end. You're welcome to share any questions or comments you have using the Q&A functionality, and you can also vote on questions that you would like to see answered. We're also recording these sessions as a public resource. I'm so excited to welcome our three guests today. It's been an absolute privilege to develop this webinar with them. They each bring such deep and unique experience in systems transformation and evaluation. I'd like to warmly welcome Sarah Callahan. Sarah is the Head of Networks and Insights at Collaboration for Impact, where she leads strategy work for networks and knowledge building, including through capturing and sharing insights for transformative change. Sarah has experience globally and in Australia, leading collaborations for systems change, specialising in justice, democracy, peace building and governance. Sarah, welcome. It's so lovely to have you with us. I'm going to ask you a quick icebreaker question just so everyone can get to know you. I would love to know, when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Thanks, Caitlin, and morning, everyone. I'm on Yugambeh Bundjalung country this morning, but that's a good question. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in South Australia in a small fishing and farming community. And I think we only had two TV stations. So for those in Australia, you'll remember that in the country, one of which was ABC. And I remember seeing Foreign Correspondent and realising, well, at the time I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I think part of it was that it was just realising there was a whole world out there and different experiences and people who may or may not look like me, but were having really different experiences. So I think that was what I wanted to do. And in some ways, I guess I didn't end up being a journalist, obviously, but it did lead me to, continuing that curiosity about how do societies organise themselves, I guess. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Sarah. What a beautiful core memory. It's amazing how those things stick with you. Our next guest is Mark Kabaj. Mark is the president of a consulting firm From Here to There and an associate of Tamarack. Mark has first-hand knowledge of using evaluation as a policymaker, philanthropist and activist, and has played a big role promoting developmental evaluation in Canada. Mark, welcome, and tell us, when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, thanks, Caitlin, for stewarding us in this call, and to Jess and the Clear Horizons team for putting it on, and to Sarah for joining in this conversation. I wish I would have gone before Sarah, or not at all, because my answer is pretty superficial. I grew up in Treaty 6 country in northeastern Alberta, which is Treaty 6, mostly of Cree nations, but many others as well. And I grew up in a farming community as well, Sarah. But my first thing that I can remember is quite early is I wanted to be a horse. I, I remember wanting it so bad. I just wanted to run. And I must have had a lot of energy, and I did run a lot as a kid, but I saw so many horses and I was just preoccupied with it. And I had more sophisticated thoughts over time about what I wanted to be. But Caitlin, you asked me about my first memory, and that was it. And it was pretty clear, and it didn't unfold the way I wanted.
Oh, Mark, I love that. It really speaks to, I guess, seeing ourselves as part of nature and valuing a more than human world. That's a
There we
beautiful
go.
answer. Thank you for that. And our final guest is Jess Dart. Jess is the founder and CEO of Clear Horizon, well known in Australia and abroad for her extensive MEL experience. Jess, welcome. And tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Hi, everybody, and I'm coming from the land of the Bunurong people. Yeah, I grew up in Yorkshire in the industrial north. So not, I would love to have grown up in the country, but I grew up in the terrace houses of Wakefield. If you've ever seen Full Monty or Brastoff or any of those, you'll that's where I grew up. So I was a stubborn little girl. Didn't like people asking me what I would do when I grew up. So I used to tell everybody, they said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I would say, "I'm going to be a fish farmer," because I just thought that would shut everybody up. I didn't really want to be a fish farmer. I think I probably wanted to have lots of horses, like you, Mark. I used to fantasize about horses a lot when I was little, but it did sort of speak to the fact that I was a bit stubborn and I liked to be different, and maybe that has continued through. But lovely, yeah, lovely to hear the fishing. We've got a bit of a fishing thing. Yeah, there's a bit of fish thread, bit of a rural thread here. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jess. It's so wonderful to have all three of you with us today. Before we dive into our conversation, we really wanted to see who's in the room with us. So we're going to open a quick poll. And the question for everyone in the room is, which option best describes your role in systems transformation? And we have four options. I lead or design strategy and evaluation efforts for systems transformation. I support or contribute to strategy and evaluation. I observe or use strategy and evaluation, or I'm new to this area and here to learn. And while we're waiting for everyone to pop their answers in, I might just ask our guests. We're going to start with Sarah. Which of these describes your role in systems transformation?
Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, I co-lead, I guess, and co-design with partners and internal colleagues as well, strategies for transformation. So, for example, designing initiatives, but also working with, we're doing some work at the moment with funders around learning about what their roles are in systems transformation. So,
Beautiful. Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I would say that I support or contribute to strategy and evaluation. Because I'm a consultant at this point in my life, I used to lead, and I would put a little qualifier in there, Caitlin, that I think for a long time we were using the word systems change, and only recently did we start using the word transformation. So I would say this is a relatively recent kind of work that I've been doing, like many others.
Amazing. Thank you, Mark. And Jess?
Yeah, I'm with Mark. So I work as a strategist and an evaluator, as a thought partner, learning partner with organizations and collaborations. So I'm always at the table with lots of other people. I'm certainly not leading. I'm sort of playing a role at the table. That's what evaluators often do, particularly evaluation. So I'm a career evaluator for my sins, and so yeah, it's sort of sitting at the table with others who are leading the work. Yeah, and trying to be helpful.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jess. I think that really speaks to a lot of systems transformation work, which really is that sort of that lateral networked approach. And we might just check the results and see who's in the room with us. Oh, so quite a few folks supporting, contributing to strategy and evaluation, which again, I think reflects that sort of co-leadership network kind of approach to it. A beautiful 16% who are new to this area and here to learn. Welcome. Please, please, please ask questions. This is such a warm and welcoming space, and it's so exciting to see 16% of people who are new to this area, and about a quarter who are leading or designing, and about 8% who are observing or using. So a really, really diverse mix of people in the room today with us. Thank you everyone so much for giving us a little bit of insight into who you are and the role that you're playing. We're going to dive in. So strategy and evaluation can really play a vital role in transforming systems towards equity and sustainability, which feels particularly important at the moment. And today we want to explore how we as change makers, as strategists, as evaluators can really sharpen our tactics, our skill sets, so we can work in this really fast moving context to create systems transformation. So I'm going to turn to Jess for my first question, and Jess, just ask you, what is systems transformation? We heard Mark say earlier, we used to call it systems change. So what is systems transformation and why is it so important in this global moment?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure everybody uses different definitions. Systems change. I've noticed people talking about systems wide change lately as well. Systems transformation. I think they're all in the same family, so you might use different terms. But all of these are talking about taking more of a holistic, maybe zoomed out view of how to make change. So and I guess it's also recognizing that the way we've been working, so working in programs or single point solutions, so like trying to work on this, let's say kids that aren't going to school, that you might focus on school programs, realizing that school refusal might have all these other elements that are to do with what's happening in the homes, in the communities, and taking a bigger and bigger view of how to solve that problem. So it's a zoomed out, bigger view of change that is beyond programs. I often think the really key difference is it's not programs. It's not about a programmatic approach. It's something else. So that helps me to think about it. And another thing to really understand about systems change or transformation approaches, it starts with this idea that systems, when there is no disruption, which is an interesting time because there's a lot of disruption right now, but when there's not too much disruption, systems do not like to change. They get locked into place, into status quo, and they're hard to shift. So you might do this bit of work, as soon as it stops, you're back to where you were. A bit like me and my approach to, exercise. I have this great idea that I'm gonna go out there and do all this, and I do it for about a month, and then I stop and back to where I was before. So systems don't like to change. So I guess that's the thing, is systems transformation is really thinking about how you move the actual status quo, the things that are locking a system in place in a sustainable way. Some people, I realized you can think about it as a new version of sustainability as well. So it's not just change short term. How do you create long-term change that will stay, will stick, will grip, take grip? Why? And I guess why is this important right now is because we have all these crises going on, in the world. We've got climate change and inequity and people moving, movement of people, climate refugees, all sorts of challenges that are beginning to intersect. Some people are calling it polycrisis, when one crisis intersects with another. And it's really time to think about how we lift our gaze and work together at a more systems-wide approach. And that's maybe a third element in my definition, is that we aren't talking, systems are everywhere. Okay, you have computer systems, work systems, transport systems, everything's a system, but we are talking about societal systems. I know in one framework they call it the regime. I quite like that. So we're talking about the regime. We're talking about systems-wide approaches. Hopefully that's enough to get you clear on what we're talking about. And I'm sure Mark and Sarah will chip in too.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, so it feels like it's very much about, taking a holistic view, trying to see the whole, and also really trying to shift things that are quite entrenched. Sarah, I might throw to you to build on that. And I know your interests are also very much in the strategy space. So keen to understand the role of strategic thinking in transforming systems.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks, Jess, for kicking us off. I love that holistic sense, and I think also just what's really different about transformation. So we're not reforming things, we're actually fundamentally changing the way we think and behave. And I guess for us, in terms of like thinking about strategy and the role of strategy in that's helpful to keep in mind. So maybe at CFI, when we think about it, we ask ourselves, well, what are we transforming to and for what purpose? And that helps us to think about then where we're going and how we get there. And what that looks like in the day-to-day. So, strategy is also the day-to-day practices of, making decisions around how to get to that vision that you hold for yourself. So if we think that transformation is around creating a different future, then maybe one of the roles that I feel like is important for strategy to hold is imagining what that future looks like and helping others to imagine that. Because often, I guess, we can't quite see yet what that future looks like, but we just have a sense that it can be different or better. So I think also, this work, at least my experience, and I don't know about others on the call as well, but it's very emergent, and there's no sort of clear path that you're following. And so part of the strategy role, I guess, is to hold people to the purpose, which is defined and fixed, while everything else may not be fixed. So helping to find that certainty in the uncertainty, maybe. And maybe some other things that we often think about or talk about with our partners when we're thinking about how to find strategies through to that transformation is to help people to challenge and think differently about what the future could be, or what their own practice is and what their assumptions are and what that could look like if it was different. Maybe also what we call pattern spotting. So literally just seeing where are their trends. If they keep coming up as a trend, then that's one of those things that Jess said is sort of holding the system where it is. So to be able to see the trend and then see what our role is in that trend helps us to then do something different and hopefully change the system. Yeah, and I guess also problem solving through helping to see different perspectives from across the system. So often, we keep trying to solve problems because we're using the same perspectives, the same ideas, the same views around what the problem is. But maybe if we ask and talk to different people and get different takes on that, we're going to find new ways to solve those problems. So yeah, it's creative, and hopefully some of those things people also feel familiar and other people have experience of as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I love the idea of strategy as a creative practice. I also like the idea of evaluation as a creative practice. And I think, what really resonated for me there was the role of strategy in imagining and making real a really different future. That really resonated. Mark, strategy and evaluation, they're so deeply interlinked. I think strategists end up in evaluation, evaluators end up in strategy. I'm really keen to hear from you on the role of evaluative thinking in systems transformation.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin, and thanks to Jess and Sarah for the kind of scaffolding approach we're taking to answering this evaluative question. I agree, Caitlin. I always think that evaluation is a backdoor to strategy. And of course, if you're doing strategy, you're going to end up doing evaluation. And so there's lots written on evaluative thinking. I think people should just Google it and see what they find and see what's helpful. But what I am drawn to is an approach to evaluative thinking and systems change, where the purpose of evaluation is to help the change makers do their work better, to do better work. And that really means looking at evaluation as, and I'm channeling Michael Quinn Patton on this one. I sometimes feel I'm a cover band for a lot of his ideas, but I really resonate with this idea of reality testing. We all have ideas and hunches and beliefs about the way the world works, and hunches and ideas about the strategies and programs and interventions that we think are going to make a difference. So how do we ask evaluative questions about that and test all those hunches and assumptions against the cold, hard reality of the world? How do we do quick iterations of testing these things, do robust sense making about whether or not we really understand what's going on, and then really importantly, facilitating these insights into decision making. Reports don't lead to decision making. Reports clumsily try and capture insights, but the act of integrating new insights, even challenging insights, into decision making is important. How do we adopt and continually develop our strategies? And I'll give you a very quick example of that, Caitlin. Just down the street, I have a friend who's he runs a human-centered design lab. He's a very strong community activist. And last year around this time, he was mobilizing his community to deal with stinky sewers in my city of Edmonton. And we've been having these stinky sewers increasingly over the last couple of years, and he mobilized. And the issue was, we really want to change the system of sewer management in Edmonton because something was clearly wrong. Well, he caught the attention of a key civil servant who came out and sat down for a beer with him and some local folks and shared what was really going on with this system. And it turns out that the implication of low flush toilets is really good environmentally because it reduces the ratio of water to, technically we're calling it poo-poo, you know, from let's say 5 units of water to one of debris. It's now low flush toilets now mean it's 3 to 1 because we're using less water, which is really good environmentally. But what happens is that changes the relationship in the sewer. And so there's actually smell occurs a lot quicker and a lot stays around a lot longer because of that lower ratio. And so we have this unintended effect of a good environmental intervention. And now the city is trying enormous number of things, including going back 150 years to see how people dealt with this and testing out these little developments, these little alternatives to dealing with the unanticipated consequences of low flush toilets. So the reason I share that is people had a hunch that the system was not responding for a reason. They engaged with people in the system, and the outcome was increased civic literacy about the nature of the system that we're trying to change, relationships and insight and empathy with other actors in the system. And in systems change where we don't control much, we just do our very best, we can control learning. And reality testing. And so I do believe that's part of what evaluation is supposed to do in transforming systems, civic literacy, insight, empathy, and relationships.
Oh, that's a cracking example. Thank you for that, Mark. I think the other things I heard as you were just sharing that was the value in kind of sometimes going back, and sometimes the solutions are actually in the past and we just need to bring them forward into the
Yes.
future. I think that's a pattern that comes up. Is that resonating with you, Jess?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. But also this idea that small can be big, and sometimes it's just the small changes or the small interventions that can actually really have a big kind of impact on the systems that we're working in. Mark, I might stay with you as a bit of a segue from this one, as you mentioned Michael Quinn Patton, and I think systems change, systems transformation, systems thinking, it's a really busy field. There's a lot of teachers, a lot of lineages, a lot of different models. I'm really keen to hear from you. Are there particular models or frameworks that you really enjoy working with? And why do you love them?
Well, there's a lot of them, and I know that we're going to hear some about several of them today. I'll just pick one, and you asked us to pick one that resonates with us most. I like an adaptive version of the Three Horizons framework that a lot of people know about. It was originally steeped in ideas from a fellow named Steve Waddell, who talked about 3 degrees of change, and then I think it was McKinsey and others who developed it even further. And they make the distinction you talked about earlier, Sarah, the distinction between what I would argue is between incremental change, keep the system the same but improve it, reform-oriented change, keep the ideas under the system sustained but reform its structure and its processes, and transformative change, transform the system and to something entirely new. And the code that we have found useful in using that Three Horizons framework for transformative work is incremental change is same game, same rules. Reform-oriented change is same game, different rules. Transformative change is different game and different rules. And what's really good about sensitizing that is the understanding the degrees of change is really important because it requires different strategies. It requires different levels of feasibility. It's very difficult to transform systems and it takes a long time. And it gives a lot of insights, which we can talk about later, about trying to understand what's reasonable to expect in terms of outcomes at any given time. Incremental changes, outcomes are more tangible and immediate, likely. Transformative, they're unbelievably unpredictable and take a long time to unfold. So I like that one because it's got lots of ripple effects in terms of practice.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark. And we'll be sharing links to all the models that are referenced in the conversation today. I love that one. Jess, your favorite model?
I do like the three. I think we all like the Three Horizons model. We were fighting for that one, weren't we? I love using that because I like to think of like, what is the future state? You know, what is it that we want? What's the preferred future? How do we imagine that? Where are we now? And then how do we get there? And I guess the one that I've been using relentlessly lately has been a model called the Four Keys, which was put forward by Jenny Winhall and Charlie Leadbeater. And I like it because it's really simple at level, but it puts out that how do systems transform? So it's a bit like, it's not so much about what is system A, what is system B, but it's about how what needs to shift in order to change a system. And they make the case that systems are locked, but if there's disruption going on, such as now, opportunity for change, then you can shift these 4 keys, become looser. And the 4 keys that they talk about are easy to remember because there's only 4, but they are power. So power dynamics, you can shift power dynamics. It is resource flows, and that can be money, but it can also be assets and knowledge. And it is it's connections, so it's relationships between different systems actors. And the final one is purpose, which is a very profound one, because that is the purpose is about the purpose, the innate purpose of the system, which I guess when systems fully transform, they'll have a different purpose. So they're the 4, and you can use these all through the work, which is why people can remember them. I like that. But also you can use them in strategy. So you can use them in strategy, thinking about what are the levers of change. So you can think about changing power dynamics, like maybe giving people with lived experience or young people more decision-making power in the system. Or you could connect different systems actors together, and there's lots of work you can do around that. So that's just 2 examples of strategy, but you can apply them to all 4. Also, it's a very handy framework to use in evaluation, and you can use it all the way through. You can actually use it as a bit of a baseline, like where are we now? Where's power? Where are resource flows? Who's getting what? What's system A in terms of the 4 keys? And you can sort of, and you can think about what would the purpose look like if it was transformed? You can sort of see it as a future, use it to understand the future state, and then actions between. And you can evaluate against it. So you can look for signals of these things shifting. Because people in evaluation, they often aim too high or too low, especially in systems transformation. So there's one problem is that people all attached to looking at population level changes, like so improvements in reduction in poverty or things like that. And that's great to do, but because systems take so long to shift that they might not be shifting and you don't get any feedback. So that's problematic. And others just focus on the results of the, how many people have we engaged? Who have we worked with? Sort of activities, or maybe how effective are the little experiments that we're doing, or the little prototypes we're trying, which is really important to do, but it's not enough to understand. I'll get some feedback from the actual system itself. So system signals against the 4 keys. So I'm loving the 4 keys. For those of you who use the waters of systems change, they're very similar. So if you're using that, that's another one. Waters of systems change is a triangle. It has 7. It adds in policy and practices as well, and mindsets. So I think purpose and mindsets are a bit interrelated, but the waters of systems change also has policies and practices. I don't like to put them on the table too early. Why? Status quo. People know how to evaluate practices and policies. People know how to think like that. And they often just end up back in normal evaluation and normal strategy. And I want them to actually focus on power, on resource flows, on connections, and on purpose. Yeah, so that's why I love it.
Amazing. Thanks, Jess. I think 2 really sort of important things that resonated for me there was the importance of choosing models that can serve multiple purposes, but also models that the system that you're working in is going to be able to, grip and absorb. That feels really quite important. Sarah, you're a big fan of 3 Horizons as well, but what other models are you enjoying working with?
Yeah, so at the moment, actually, so I've chosen 2 because they're interrelated. So one of the things we're doing a lot of work on is around roles, and what are the roles required to shift systems, sorry. So one of those is the Berkana 2 loops, which people are probably familiar with, which outlines the different roles that are played in that transformation process. I think why I like it is it helps to validate that there are lots of different roles, and that those roles each have purpose at the right time for the right reasons. But it also helps, so for example, just for people who aren't familiar with it, like there's kind of a hospice worker. So there's a process of letting go or supporting people to celebrate what has been in the change process, but there's also those who are pushing radical change, who are thinking much further ahead. And both of those are needed and valid. But I think it also helps in terms of strategy, because you can look at it and think, okay, what roles don't we have right now that might be needed? Who might we want to engage to be playing those roles? It helps to think about what we're learning, like what role is my organisation playing, or what role am I playing at this point in the process, and is that a helpful role to be playing right now? And the kind of sister one to that I've mentioned is something we're working with a lot called Transforming Experience Framework. It's a Venn diagram, and it kind of maps role, so your personal, with role at the center, sorry, and it maps your personal experience. So all your beliefs and your history and your perspective you're bringing to the role, as well as what's going on in the organization or the context, and then the broader system and how those intersect. So it helps to reflect on what you're bringing to the role that you're playing and what's influencing that. So I think, just going back to what Mark was saying earlier around the past, it's bringing in what are all the things from the past that you're bringing in to the way that you're understanding your role, engaging with others in the system, or what's going on in the context that's relevant for how you're interpreting and understanding your role as well. So it's more of a reflective tool, I guess, for individuals to navigate their role in supporting the change, or where they may be unconsciously blocking that change. So yeah.
Sarah, it's such a good point, and I think one of the things that I've really grappled with in this work is, I think in traditional paradigms, I think you almost, as evaluators or strategists, you assume yourselves to be outside of the system a little bit, and that who you are as a person doesn't necessarily influence or have a role to play. And I think that's been a big shift, is actually all of that really matters. Who you are as an intervener, as a strategist, as an evaluator, it really matters. I don't know if Jess, you want to speak to the idea of inner work in systems transformation.
Yeah, I think it's so important, Sarah, and I know that CFI does really great work around this. Is really working on how you are showing up. I mean, it's systems change work. Like, we don't know what the answers are, right? We're going on this journey together, and you have to sort of like work on yourself to be open and to be vulnerable and to not know. And like, we're so used to turning up as experts, aren't we? The expert model is not so useful in systems transformation, is it? The personas we take, it's that the expert is unhelpful because we don't know, right? So you have to do work, and organizations have to do work on themselves. So it's like, as an individual, you got to learn how to show up differently. Organizations have to get that they can't do it on their own, right? You cannot do systems transformation on your own. It's just impossible. Like, you have to work with others, and that's a little bit of an ego hit, isn't it? If you've always done, well, how are we going to change the world? What's our impact? When suddenly it's not just about your organization. It's about, can you play a role with others to sort of like work together to tackle some of this really challenging stuff. So I think there's inner work for individuals. There's almost inner work for repositioning for organizations as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Jess. And thank you, everyone. It's so exciting to see so many amazing new ways emerge for strategy and evaluation. But one of the things we spoke about was that old practices can really stubbornly persist. And I think, Mark, I've heard you use the term zombie practices. And I love this phrase because it just gives the sense for me of like this constantly respawning of these things that we know aren't helpful, that we don't want. Jess, I might stay with you and then throw to Mark. What are some of the zombie practices that you see kind of most often in your work, and how do they hinder systems transformation?
It's quite a lot, really, which is hard. You have to do a lot of unlearning to do this work. But one of the sort of like really big things is just planning itself, like how we plan strategy, how we plan evaluations, both things. So the traditional approaches, of like doing an assessment of the situation, and like working out, doing your SWOT analysis, and developing your pillars for the future, and then change pillars, and then planning it all out, and then executing it, and tracking your KPIs and delivering on this. It doesn't work like that. Planning doesn't work like that. Waterfall planning doesn't work. So if you invest really strongly in this big plan and you expect to execute it, you'll be wasting a lot of time. Same with evaluation. Evaluators, traditional evaluation involves developing this really rigorous plan, an evaluation plan with your theory of change and your indicators and your questions, and then you roll it all out. I remember doing that, the first systems change job I had, where I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll develop this plan, but it'll look a bit different than normal. But I still went for this big plan and I did it, and it was really hard. And then everything changed because they changed their idea about what they should do because they learned something, and I had to redo the plan. And then they changed their idea again, and I had to change the plan again. And then they changed their idea again. In 2 years, they changed the direction of the strategy 4 times, 4 big pivots. Every time I had to rewrite the evaluation plan. I used up nearly all the budget for the whole evaluation just in writing the plan before we'd done anything. So I then was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never doing that again. I'm going to start with a really high level, just 2 pages, what are the principles, how are we going to work together, and I'm going to let it evolve. I'm going to slow cook the plan. Don't get too carried away too quickly because I know it's going to change. So it's much more like the agile approach, high level, doing, planning the next phase with a rough idea of where you're heading. So that changes everything about planning for both the strategy, the work, and also for the evaluation. And if you don't change that way, you're going to waste an awful lot of time and money. So worth letting go of that.
Oh, thanks, Jess. I love the idea of slow cooked planning. Mark, what are the zombies in your life?
Oh, no, let's just talk about evaluation, Caitlin. I've got a lot of zombies in my life. Yeah, I do like the phrase. I'm actually writing a resource now called Evaluating Systems Change, Zombie Practices and Their Better Alternatives. And one of the chapters is focused on metrics and dashboards. And I think this question, what are the metrics and how do you put a dashboard up, is a zombie practice. And I'm getting kind of old, actually, I realized, looking at this myself on the screen here and thinking about all the times we've had this conversation. So I have the right to be grumpy about things, and I'm quite tired of people talking about metrics. And I'm not anti-metric at all. I do like good quantifiable data, but I have never seen an interesting metric stand on its own that means anything. When people ask for, what are the metrics, I usually say 7. And, is that good? Can we move on? Who knows? Good systems evaluation and transformation evaluation requires someone to set up the context really good. What is the nature of the situation we're in, and what are we trying to change? What are we going to do, and what does success look like? And how will we know? Usually using a mix of qualitative and quantitative information, which unavoidably requires stakeholders to weigh in and say something substantive. And so Michael has this phrase that we developed in a course at a university in Canada called, the phrase is no narratives without numbers, no numbers without narratives. And it's a nice way of capturing things. It's a little bit more than narrative, but I do think we in the West have an ideological obsession with metrics, and it literally is like an obsession. And I think we need an exorcism. And it's a product of being Western and industrial, and there's probably some left brain male dynamics involved in that. But if metrics are disembodied from what's going on and how people experience the situation, I don't want to talk about them. So dashboards, yes, but when and where and how, usually contextualized in a hell of a lot of good of evaluative context setting and understanding that change is tracked using both qualitative and quantitative information. In fact, I'll say this, I think we absolutely have to move on from this. We've got more troubles than we can handle on evaluating systems change. We have to slay this one and put it in its proper place fast, because it takes up way too much oxygen.
Thanks for that, Mark. I think if we could collectively build a methodology for that exorcism you spoke about, I think that would be an amazing thing.
It's probably Horizon does lots of dashboards, but I agree with you that it's not the starting place, is it? And it's not the and there is an obsession with wanting them, and also that you can have qualitative data on dashboards these days.
Oh yeah, and just I know we realize, as long as they're contextualized in something. Most dashboards not a lot of dashboards I've seen are a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of reality that arrives late and is decontextualized.
Yes, that's so true.
Right, and so if someone doesn't know what's going on, then you go, well, please don't make a decision based on this. But if for someone who's in the thick of it, knows what's going on, and it's surrounded by a whole lot of other coherency, then they're useful. So I think it depends on the context. The technique isn't wrong. It's the reliance on creating that technique up front right away or using that practice. That's problematic, I think.
Well, and I wonder if for us, we would use this as a chance to come back to purpose. So for what? Who
Yes.
is those dashboards serving, and why is there an obsession with those dashboards? What needs to shift in the way that the people who want those dashboards think differently about what they're asking for, what's needed, how we use them, so on. So yeah, purpose.
Good. Yeah, I agree, sir.
Yeah. It's probably a really beautiful segue to one of our last questions before we go over to our audience, which is the question around resistance in systems transformation work. Sarah, I don't know if you want to lead us off, but I would love to hear any advice you have for navigating and leading into resistance. I think you sort of touched on purpose there. I'd love to hear some more.
Yeah, I guess we would say where there's resistance, it's a opportunity to lean into the change that's needed. It's a sign that there is something that needs to be shifted. And I guess often we think about it in two ways. One is it's power dynamics showing up, and so you could work with those, or it could be really deeply held, different perspectives, so polarities, and so how you work with those. But either way, those are, I think, opportunities to engage with the power or engage with the polarity. And both of those, I think, are things that we, particularly Australians, after living away for a long time and coming back, I've noticed this even more. We find it really uncomfortable. We don't want to deal with it either, and we tend to avoid it. And so leaning into the practice of how to do that is where you get the transformation. So, I mean, as an example, we were doing a workshop with some partners in community, and it was a couple of weeks after the voice referendum. The community was looking at developing a 30-year long-term plan, and they had industry and government and community members and everyone in the room, and there was a real they'd done a lot of work leading up to that. There was a real kind of shared excitement about the work to be done. And quite early in the day, a First Nations man stood up and said, I'm not sure that I should be here and be part of this conversation. I'm not sure that you people want to hear my voice about this. And the room was really uncomfortable. People did not know how to respond. There was silence. And so I guess an example of how we tried to make a judgment call on what's safe to do right now, but part of that was just letting that silence sit. And then someone from the community stood up and said, well, I want you to be here. I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, I think your opinion's valid and your perspective's going to be really valid. Someone else stood up and said, I feel really, really uncomfortable and I don't know how to talk about this, and I'm here in my role with government, but I would value having a conversation about how we address this issue if we're going to work together. And that just opened up then space for later in the day to actually set aside some time for that group to work through what does it mean. What is happening in the context in the system is happening in the room. And I guess that's, there's other ways to do that, like really day to day, to practice that, because it's uncomfortable and it's hard to do, and we're not all facilitating a big group. But for example, a colleague was saying she's running the Women's Week at her local soccer club. And there was all these dynamics going on in the soccer club about how that would happen. And she, had heard all these rumours that a particular man who was quite powerful in the club wasn't happy with how that's going. And she just pulled him aside and said, hey, can we have a chat? I hear you have a really different view about this. Like, tell me what your concerns are. Those are the kinds of conversations that we need to lean into and practice more and more so we can change the way that we think about something or the way that we approach the change that's, the change in the way we do it. So yeah, there's a lot about, I think, just trusting your judgment and feeling what feels right at the time. And if it doesn't feel safe or it doesn't feel comfortable, maybe leave it. But usually where there's an uncomfortableness, that's when you should press on it, I think.
I love that, Sarah. And it's really counterintuitive, isn't it? That, it's almost like you need to lean into that discomfort, which kind of probably goes against a lot of instinct in that space.
Mm.
Yeah. Mark, did you want to build on that?
Ever so briefly, thank you, Caitlin, because I know you're trying to manage time and still some additional questions. I like it a lot, Sarah. I have a slightly different phrase, but it's the same spirit that if there's resistance, you run to it. It's a terrific opportunity for learning and to test again your hunches about the world. I know a lot of time people think it's only about power, and I think it's always about power as a central issue. That's why we see resistance to change, but it's way, way more than that. It is people wanting to preserve some of the good things in the old system, from the old system. It is people feeling overwhelmed with what it takes to make change. It is people who want to make a change, but the changes are so interdependent into other parts of the system. It's like a humongous knot, and they don't know where to get started. And I've got a whole list of things that I've seen people refer to in the past. And from a learning and evaluation point of view, if you see resistance, it's an opportunity for learning and relationship building. Run to it. Find out. Do not trust your judgment that you understand what the resistance is. You might be partially right, but you probably won't be completely right.
And evaluators, like that's a role that we often play, is looking for the critical
Yes.
voice, looking for the dissenting voice, looking to the margins. We talk about looking to the margins of the system. Who's like on the outer, not in the inner conversation, who's got a different view, is what would be a tip, that would be a sort of evaluation practice to seek those people out, wouldn't it? Well, some methods of evaluation anyway, but yeah.
I agree.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. I've so enjoyed wandering through this conversation with you. We're going to move to questions from the audience in a minute. So this is your last call. Get your questions into the Q&A so I can see them. But just quickly, if you are interested in learning more, Clear Horizon has a 6-week course, and they'll be starting on May 9th on systems transformation, strategy and evaluation. It was co-created by Jess and Anna Powell at CFI. And it provides a lot of the knowledge and resources for those who are working in this space. We also have a limited time offer that gives you 10% off the course, and it's valid till the 24th of April, and we'll send the details in a follow-up email after this session. We also have a developmental evaluation course that's beginning from the 11th of July. And also lastly, CFI is holding the Systems Transformation Forum, building on previous discussions in this space, which is likely to happen in October. So keep an eye out for that one. And I'm going to move us to some questions from the audience. Let's see what we've got. A few things coming through. So the first question I've got, Jess, which I might throw to you, and then Mark, Sarah, invite you to build as well. Would you agree that most transdisciplinary activities are actually aiming for systems change?
Well, I don't know. I have been seeing a few transdisciplinary approaches that are more contained, that are more programmatic, and they're always challenging. I always think the experiences I've had where you bring different disciplines together is always so hard to create that common narrative, and often you get great insights from it. I would say that I would go the other way around, that all systems transformation initiatives need to be transdisciplinary, right? But I don't think all transdisciplinary activities are addressing systems wide or change or systems transformation. I think that's how I'd go. But there's definitely something really important about bringing different disciplines together for this work. Would you guys agree? Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if we go back to purpose of transforming to what it and fundamentally changing, there can be really good examples of working across disciplines to share information, to share knowledge, to coordinate, but they don't have a purpose of changing the system that they're working in and with necessarily. So, depends.
Necessary but not sufficient. Isn't that the logic?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think that's the right answer. You need to be transdisciplinary for systems change, but transdisciplinary actions might be systemic in their nature if the system you're working with is not connected and is siloed, etc. But for sure, it's necessary to be transdisciplinary in systems change and transformation.
Which
That's a
is
great
hard,
answer.
really
That's
hard,
a great
because
answer. Yeah.
then that's one of the reasons why there's a long roadmap, is that you have to sort of understand each other, and you don't at the beginning because you've got all these different language and different paradigms, things like
Yeah.
that.
Beautiful. Thank you all. There's a great question in here, which is like, I don't know, after my own heart, I swear. This is, I'm keen to understand how you would navigate the need to respond to government and philanthropic funders who want to see often short-term impact when you're working on systems transformation. Mark, do you want to try and take this one? And then maybe Jess?
Sure, I'll try and be quick on this one. It's hard as well. For those of you on LinkedIn, Joe Taylor sent a little note out yesterday. I saw Jess, you were on it as well. And I wrote a really long response to it. And then I figured out I could only do 250 words, so I lost it, the response. But one of the issues was sort of related to that about the accountability push in these relationships. And Jesse and Sarah, you have a lot to say about that. I have an image around evaluation where it's like an oxygen mask coming down from the plane. The change makers deserve the evaluation oxygen mask first, and then they can help others. If we need to empower change makers to ask the questions they want to ask in the way they want to ask them, and to go get the answers in the way that best fit their context. And if we privilege funders, both in terms of evaluative processes and their own expectations of change, we're disempowering the change makers, and no one needs that. And the upside is, to a funder, if you work with a group and you literally embed yourself and osmose yourself, and that's not a word, but get embedded in their situation and understand what they're trying to achieve and how, you will probably develop more realistic expectations about what might happen around change. And you're more likely to accept their evaluation processes as even more than you require to fulfill your kind of administrative accountability requirements. So change makers first, funders second, both on what's reasonable to expect and how do you design an evaluation to help you find out if it is something that's changing.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I agree. I mean, I think that at a level, you got funders have to change too, hey, and they have to learn about this. Just everybody has to unlearn things if you want to do this work. Evaluators, funders, change makers, communities, we've all got learning to do, and learning about results is really important, because if you go into this work as a funder with this idea that you're going to get, results really quickly, then you're going to be so disappointed. So I guess managing expectations around results is really important. But that doesn't mean to say there aren't results early on. It's just they're very different. So if you understand the sort of like phasing, or the arc, if you like, the arc of how systems transformation works, the first few years, for example, are really all about getting on the, getting the on-ramp. There's no big changes happening. You shouldn't expect results too early, but you should expect to see new partners coming together, trust being built, relationships being built, learning to be occurring, lots of learning, more learning, building muscle in how to learn and unlearn. That should all be happening. So it's a different thing to evaluate, isn't it? It's you're evaluating whether conditions are being put in place in order to do the work. And I guess it just happens, it takes longer because you're working with more actors, you've got a bigger system to work, you're more likely to need to change what you were going to do. So managing expectations, funders have to come on the journey too. I think I've seen some really great funders step up and really learn about systems transformation and begin to understand and have different sorts of metrics that they're asking, and do more. At the end of the day, for foundations, high trust philanthropy is the ticket, isn't it? Is trust that the partners and work with them on a different model and show up differently yourselves. And you might be amazed if you actually just don't want too much evaluation early on at all, do you really? Let's face it, it's my discipline, right? But I know we get in the way, right? In the early years, evaluation gets in the way. So you really have to dial it back, slow cook it, build it up as the initiative grows, add more in middle and later years. But early on, just stay out. Don't be in the driver's seat. Don't let evaluation drive it. It will crash it. And let's face it, quite a lot of initiatives do fail in the first few years. And so it is a really key time to show up differently and give space.
Thanks for that, Jess.
I know.
Sarah, we've got a question. Oh, please go, please.
I jump in on that because I'm such a governance geek. I find that accountability part fascinating. So I think Jess said earlier in the call, one organization cannot do systems transformation. It requires everyone. So for when we're thinking about what are we learning and what's the impact and what can we be measuring or looking at, it requires everyone in the system to be sharing what they are contributing to the systems transformation. And as Jess said, there are some examples of funders who are starting to step into that and lean into it. It comes back to, though, being really clear what your role in the system is, to be able to understand what you're influencing, what you're not influencing, what you're learning from that, and then sharing it with others. So instead of asking some parts of the system to be sharing the impact that they are creating, how are we collectively creating impact? We had a conversation just very recently with a funder who's doing some really great work to understand what they're learning about an initiative that they're supporting. But, the next step in that would be sharing that really openly with everyone else in the system, not just with us. It would also be, helping to think about or getting clearer before they start the initiative on what their role is in the initiative, as opposed to just kind of learning about it while it was happening. So I think there's some good signs, but I think there's also some more work from other parts of the system to be learning what their role is in contributing to that impact.
Thank you, Sarah. I think it also, I don't know, speaks to, again, this need for vulnerability if you need to take on a different role, and perhaps connects back to our early sort of thread around the inner work that you need to do in order to step into a different role in this work. Sarah, I think we've got time for one more question. I might stay with you if I can. The question is, to what extent should we define the systems change we want to see, or is it enough or better to have just systems transformation, or to have systems transformation as our goal?
I think I guess that's why we focus on purpose, because if you're clear on purpose, then and your purpose is to transform. So say your purpose is to create a Australia where everyone feels they belong, then you can stay with that purpose, and then how you get there and what needs to change along the way can change. I feel like for those who have an international development background, you remember like a decade ago or more, there was a lot of conversation around how to do that in the way that they measure and learn from initiatives, right? So what is the overall goal you're working towards? And then everything else kind of is flexible and depends on the context and the opportunities as they arise. So not sure it entirely answers, but I feel like if you're clear on what you're trying to achieve big picture, then you can work out if you're on the path, which is going to look very different than you think it might.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. I'm really mindful that we're almost at time. There are still like quite a lot of questions in the Q&A. So what we will do is we will answer them post-webinar, just briefly. Really want to make sure that everyone who took the time to ask a question gets an answer. A massive thank you to our guests, Sarah, Mark, and Jess. As I mentioned, we're going to be sharing links to all the resources that were mentioned in this discussion. At the end of the webinar, a short feedback survey is going to pop up. You'll also receive it via email if you don't have time to complete it now, but your feedback will really help us plan for future webinars. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and go gently out there.
And thank you, Caitlin, for convening it so beautifully. Thank you.
Yes, great job. Thanks, everyone.